maybe there's some information that I'm missing, but I'm really struggling to understand everybody who's saying that this student deserved an F, a 0% on her paper. I understand this is a small issue, but I find it to be kind of an interesting one because one is blowing up right now a little bit, and two, because it's the first one that I've seen where I wanted to do a video where I decidedly side with conservatives in general. And that's not because I automatically think that the student's in the right or because she's conservative, because she wrote about the Bible or Jesus or God. Um, but as I'm reading this article, and as this is the second article I've read about it, and it's the second article that is writing about it from the side of this professor never should have been placed on leave, and the student deserves the 0% that she got on her assignment, and the student failed to do the assignment properly, and she did not meet the criteria of the assignment, and all this is trying to make that case, and it's not succeeding. Um, and I've seen a bunch of comments on all of this and a bunch of people saying, well, she didn't do the assignment at all. So, and she wrote with a sixth grade level, or some people are claiming even below a sixth grade level. She had no rational thought process, all this stuff. And I've read her essay and I've read the information that's given by these articles about the essay and about the assignment, and in no way did she not follow the assignment according to the information that I've been given. So I'm wondering if there's some more information out there that I'm not seeing, because that's possible. Was there a rubric that hasn't been displayed? Was there criteria given for the assignment to the students that she didn't follow? Maybe there is, and I could be convinced if you show me that, but so far I haven't seen it. So I'm wondering where everyone's coming up with the idea that she didn't follow the assignment. So let me go ahead and just pull up a screen recording here, and I'll put it up on the screen here, and I'm going to walk through this article in 3, 2, 1. Here we are. University of Oklahoma places professor on leave after student cries religious discrimination for bad grade, not just a bad grade, a 0, on an essay. Let's read the article. After a University of Oklahoma student accused a psychology professor of religious discrimination after she was given a 0 on an essay about gender for using the Bible and her personal opinions instead of empirical evidence, the university released a statement saying that the professor has been put on administrative leave. Now, immediately, I'm going to be looking for any empirical evidence in this article that says that she was asked to use empirical evidence, because that is right on the front end. That's the statement that the article's making, that's saying this is why she got an F. This is how the article's justifying, the author of the article is justifying her grade. So if you're going to justify her 0 in that way, then it would stand to reason that you're going to provide evidence in this article that shows that she was asked to do that and failed to do that. So let's read on and see if the article does that. A Christian college student has started an all-out war after she received a failing grade on a psychology essay for using the Bible as her only source. This article sucks. I would argue that this article is worse than the paper she wrote. And for one thing, it's because it's making claims and correlations that simply are not defensible. At least she defended hers, saying, this is my personal opinion, this is what the Bible says, this is what I believe about God. Now, whether any of that's true or not is up for debate. This is making claims that are legitimately not really up for debate, because they can be proven one way or the other. Did she fail it for using the Bible as her only source? That is not why she failed the essay. It's not the stated reason given by the professor, which is provided in this article, that she failed the essay. So that's just wrong, right? At least what's in the Bible can be debated. It's religious belief. You can believe it, you cannot believe it, you can debate it, you can have hundreds or thousands of reasons for believing it or not believing it, but it's up for debate. This is giving us a statement that is not supposed to be up for debate. It's like, this is why she failed it, period. And it's not why she failed it according to the professor who graded it. We'll get to that in a minute. So Samantha Fulnecky was assigned a 650-word essay about how gender stereotypes impact societal expectations of individuals. Instead, she wrote an essay. Okay, so let's read this again. She was assigned a 650-word essay about how gender stereotypes impact societal expectations of individuals. Instead, so we expect to see a completely different essay from her that does not address at all how gender stereotypes impact societal expectations of individuals. This is such a glitchy website. I kind of associate glitchy, spammy websites with sucky websites. Sorry. Anyways, she wrote an essay about what the Bible says about traditional gender roles. Interesting. Do traditional gender roles have anything to do with how gender stereotypes impact societal expectations of individuals? Yes, it does. As a nation that is not fully Christian, shouldn't be fully Christian, because it's a nation that allows and celebrates, really, the freedom of religion. And the natural consequence and result of having freedom of religion is that you will have people who are freely practicing multiple religions. But it is still a society that is greatly influenced by Christianity and by Christian thought. So is this relevant? Yes, it is. She happens to take the opposite side of the stance as what the article probably took and what her teacher probably took. But is it relevant? Is she talking about the subject at hand? Yes, she is. So instead, she wrote an essay about what the Bible says about traditional gender roles and how the notion that they are stereotypes is demonic. Okay. And how the notion that they are stereotypes is demonic. I've read her essay. That's not exactly what she said. She said promoting the concept of multiple genders, and that you can be whatever you choose to be, is demonic. That's what she said. Is that close to what this claimed? Yes, it's close, but it's very selective quotations here. That's why you're seeing one word quoted, and then the author of this article filling in the majority of the words. Whenever I see an article, any article written by anybody on any side of the political spectrum that's filling in the majority of somebody's words for them and just using one word here or there that's actually in quotations, that sounds like it's probably misusing or misrepresenting what they said. If they weren't misrepresenting what they're saying, why wouldn't they just use the whole statement in quotations? This person who wrote this article thinks that we need a whole lot of guidance to understand properly what she said. Why not just tell us what she said? Would you not think your audience is smart? Like, what's the issue here? So in doing so, she cited not a single source. This article has not told us or provided us any evidence that she was asked to cite sources. This was a reaction essay. It was, when you, after reading this article, what is your reaction to it? So unless a grading rubric or something comes out that says she was asked to cite multiple sources besides the obvious source of the original article that she read and was asked to respond to, this is not a problem. Like I said, maybe she was asked to do that, but then this is really terrible journalism, because the whole point of this article, like the stated purpose of this article, is to prove that this student was in the wrong. And if you have clear evidence that the student is in the wrong, why wouldn't you provide that evidence? The evidence here would be a grading rubric or an assignment, a summary of the assignment, the specific wording of the assignment that tells us she was expected to cite other sources. Because that's not an assumption we can just make. Just because it's a collegiate level course does not mean that every single assignment requires students to cite multiple sources. So this is just like, just believe us, just take our word for it. She should have cited sources. It is not known that the teacher ever asked any students to cite sources in writing their response. It could have been a personal response essay. And by the way, the most interesting thing in this whole article is where it provides the teacher's statement as to why she got a low grade. I should say the lowest possible grade. And it's not in line with what the article's saying, but we'll get there in a second. Cool. So she was given a 0. This is the first time I heard she was given a 0, and I was like, 0? 0? 0 is what you get if you don't do the assignment. And there's people saying she didn't do the assignment. I don't see the evidence that she didn't do the assignment. We don't even, we, including the people saying this, don't even know what the assignment was. Unless you have information that I don't have that was not provided in 2 articles that were supposedly going to prove that she didn't do the assignment, why didn't either one of them provide that proof? So, no, 0? Okay, 60% would even be defensible. A failing grade of 55% would be defensible. I would still disagree with it, but it would be defensible. 0? So she was given a 0 by graduate Professor Mel Kurth, who explained explicitly that the grade was because Fulnecky wrote an essay based solely on opinion rather than on the empirical evidence required to be in a scientific class. So take our word for it. This is what Mel Kurth explained. Interesting thing is it includes her explanation, and this is not what she says. And yet again, this sucky website, the content is completely in keeping with how much this website sucks in general. So we're going to wait for it to load here. We're going to try to X out of all this BS that it's pulling up instead of the article. And it's refusing to load that statement. So we'll just close this out. This is bottom of the barrel online content. So for that reason also, that's another strike against it. So we're going to X out of this again. We're going to try again to get this website to load the actual content of its own site rather than a bunch of advertisements. Here we go. Literally not loading this again. And this is kind of the crux. I mean, I can't do this video without this because this is the crux of the issue here. The fact that the actual statement from this teacher, from the graduate professor, does not match what the article says. And it does not add up as to why she got a 0. Why do I care so much? I mean, this is one person. I'm still just waiting for this to load. This is one person. This is not a life or death situation, and I've said that in the other video I did about this. This is not a life or death situation. In my opinion, this may be a distraction from life and death situations. But the distraction is not the fact that it happened. The fact that it happened is real. It did happen. And there's legitimate concern that she was discriminated against. Discrimination is not okay, period. And I would make the same argument if it was a Muslim or a liberal person who wrote an essay from a liberal point of view in a setting where that was not encouraged. I would make the same argument no matter who it was being discriminated against. Now, these types of things, they do blow up because because they're easy clickbait stories. Let's be honest about this. And they distract us from actual life or death situations that do matter. This matters. This matters. Each person involved matters. Um, not not being discriminatory in any sense, in any setting matters, because it might not be you this time, so you're like, cool, yeah, I don't like that person, I'm happy that she got what she got. But it does matter when it's you and when it's people you care about, so it matters all the time, because we can't pick and choose. We shouldn't pick and choose. This kind of stuff does distract us from real stuff. We have politicians on both sides of the aisle defending genocide right now, currently. We have politicians on both sides of the aisle at very high levels, framing disagreement, simple disagreement with genocidal actions, with murderous actions on the part of the leadership, the government, the current government of a specific country, with which the population of that country does not primarily agree with anymore, and which the population of that country is getting fed up with itself and angry with itself and trying to change. But we have politicians at the highest level calling any disagreement with the government anti-Semitism, when a lot of people, including many, many Jewish people, disagree with that same government and do not like what that government is doing and want to change it. That's a mechanism for that government to stay in place against the will of its own people at this point. But we'll just call everybody anti-Semitic and somehow fix this. So the fact that both parties at the highest levels are on board with this total BS, totally illogical BS, is just a major indication that this kind of stuff is what's used to distract us. And so we shouldn't get completely distracted by it, but we should hold the same standards across the board for everybody, no matter what. And we should hold those standards of our elected politicians too, and let them know that they're going to be out of here if they can't be consistent on issues like discrimination. And that means that we care about everybody involved on all sides of any issue, and that we are not discriminatory. We're not so hung up on defending one group of people that we can just let the other group of people get blown up and chased out of their own homes and off their own land and say it doesn't matter. Because if you care about this, if you care about this student and you're saying it's because you're not for discrimination, you're saying that, not discriminating against anybody matters, you better be consistent with that wherever it applies. Let's see if we got this now. Here we go. I am so disappointed in my university, from Amelia Urquhart. And she provided the statement from Mel Kurth. She, they. And Mel said, "Please note that I am not deducting points because you have certain beliefs, but instead I am deducting point for you posting a reaction." Posting? This sounds like it was a forum post. Was this a forum post? Because that's completely different than a scholarly essay. Posting? Are you freaking kidding me? Unbelievable. Actually, very believable. To be honest, very believable. You're for posting a reaction. This is so stupid. Like, I can't believe I'm even talking about this article. And I can't believe the number of people who are taking this perspective seriously. There's a lot of BS on the other side of the aisle too. I'll be super clear about that. A lot of it. But this is, I'm just gonna have to screenshot this, take a whole photograph to even be able to read through this statement, or maybe look it up on a different site. This is crazy. This website expects to be taken seriously. The scary thing is how many people are taking it seriously. Um, I was gonna point out. So we'll just go up and Google it. Melkurth statement. Review issue statement. So maybe this is a more complete statement here from the New York Post, which I typically hate their reporting in articles because they are themselves discriminatory. They do pick and choose stories to tell a certain narrative. They do ignore stories that don't tell that narrative. They do tell the stories in a certain way to promote their narrative. But all I'm looking for here is the actual statement, and I'm not sure I'm going to get it. Okay. See, just as bad here. A bunch of advertising. The whole point is to get you to click on it, get your brain fed with a bunch of BS, and watch their advertisements. So, more advertisements. She devoted the bulk of her around 650-word essay. They're just trying to sneak in how she did, in fact, use 650 words approximately. Blah, blah, blah. Terrible, just as bad. Oh, it might come up here, but it probably won't. This is ridiculous. Probably they get paid every single time I click on it, so it's just benefiting somebody for every click. Let's go back here and try to blur out some of this stuff. Trying really hard to get you this information here because, like I said, it is super important to read the actual statement. I am definitely not in. Okay. And then here's the whole statement from the university too. Bam. Now, we'll go back to that photo if it leaves. Please note that I am not deducting points because you have certain beliefs. That's okay. Okay, let's prove it. But instead, I am deducting point. And I stop there because this is grammatically incorrect. She meant points. It's a small error, but everyone's throwing this student under the bus for every little grammatical error in her essay. Consistency is freaking important. I'm deducting point, and you mean 100 of them, for you posting a reaction paper that does not answer the questions for this assignment. What are the questions? Now, maybe there are questions for the assignment that she did not answer. That is completely possible. In which case, this is just terrible reporting that matches the other terrible reporting I've seen from anybody trying to throw the student under the bus. Because if there were clear questions to be answered that she failed to answer, they should be provided here so that the reader can decide for themselves. You're not giving us that information. You're just making assertions and asking us to unquestioningly believe you. And that's a dangerous ask, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, no matter what political or religious or what social belief you have. Just saying, just believe me on this is not acceptable. It's acceptable for Melkurth to say that because Melkurth is the one who gave the assignment, presumably. And when she gave that assignment, she handed out, presumably, expectations. And the student would therefore know the expectations that she's referring to. So I'm not actually criticizing Mel here. I'm criticizing the article because the article provided this as supposedly definitive information, but it's not without that context. Because we don't know. We've never been given the expectations for this article. So it contradicts itself. That's underlined. I've read the article. It doesn't contradict itself. The points that the student makes are consistent with her own worldview. They may not be consistent with your worldview. They may not be consistent. The one thing that could be actually contradictory is that she says, I don't know if, I'm paraphrasing here, I don't know if kids being teased for being outside the gender, outside of certain gender expectations is necessarily a bad thing. And then later at the bottom of the article, she says, I don't think that kids should be made fun of. So if that's what she's referring to, I'm going to give her that point. And again, I'm paraphrasing. Please read her article. And I read through her whole article in my other video on this, so I'm not going to do it all over again, I don't think. But maybe I will at the end, just for the fun of it, since we're already at 26 minutes. So contradicts itself. A couple points off there for one sentence that probably contradicts another sentence, but the vast majority of the article uses pretty clear rational thought given the framework that the student has, which you may not agree with. But we're talking about religion here, right? Religion does a different thing than science does. Religion explains things that science still does not, cannot, maybe will, maybe won't ever explain. And religion informs your worldview, and it can inform the lens through which you look at things like science. And any argument against that is inherently a personal opinion, a personal values argument, since there's nothing that scientifically proves that religion should not be the lens through which you look at anything. So no, by and large, it's not a contradictory essay. Heavily uses personal ideology over empirical evidence in a scientific class. Now, this suggests to me that the teacher's basis for expecting empirical evidence maybe is not that she gave the assignment in that way. Because if she gave the assignment in that way, why would she lean on in a scientific class as the justification? Again, this is personal opinion. She was asked to write, from everything we know, she was asked to write a reaction paper. Reactions to anything necessarily are informed by your personal beliefs. When you react to something, your first reaction, at least, is always informed by your personal beliefs. So this doesn't sound out of place given what we know of the assignment. If it said, write a scholarly essay agreeing or disagreeing with the points in this paper using at least 3 sources to support your opinions, that would be very different. A reaction paper, so far, again, with the information provided, does not suggest that she did anything worthy of failing the essay on this basis. And again, why bring up the fact that it's a scientific class if you wrote specific criteria into the assignment itself that she did not meet? We're just kind of assuming here. It's a scientific class. You should know that you always provide this or that in your essays. No. You don't need to take that for granted. You don't need to assume or expect a student to assume or know what your expectations are just because this is, quote, a scientific class. And by the way, the science of psychology is a little bit different than other types of science in which it's like this plus this equals this, chemical reaction. when you combine this and that in this setting, this will be what results from it. Psychology involves some cut and dry science, and it involves some assessment and some processes of thought that have been developed and refined over hundreds of years and challenged and changed and redefined over a long period of time. And it's one of the sciences that is more observation based, as opposed to like cut and dry theory based. So I don't see a huge, massive issue here. And then her last thing is, and it is at times offensive. That is a subjective statement. Could you refer to a scholarly essay that proves that her essay is offensive? Are you giving us empirical evidence here? This is just your opinion. You felt offended by it. Maybe you had good reason to feel offended by it. I could completely understand why you felt offended by it as a trans person. However, you feeling offended by it does not have any bearing on the grade whatsoever. If it does, and if it should, please point to an empirical source that says whether or not a student's essay is offensive should have a bearing on their grade. So, and it directly contradicts, speaking of contradictory, that statement contradicts her earlier statement, which is the premise of her whole statement, that says, I'm not deducting points because you have certain beliefs. Well, this student happens to have certain beliefs, and her expressing those beliefs clearly was offensive to this professor. So you are, in fact, deducting points because the student has certain beliefs and expressed them in her essay, because one of the reasons you're deducting points that you gave us is that it is at times offensive. You said that's a reason you're deducting points. So you are deducting points because the student has and expressed certain beliefs, period. So this does not withstand the test of simply applying the same standards that she's applying when grading the essay itself. This professor does not stand up to her own tests of logical consistency, whatever else she's applying to it. So that's pretty cut and dry right there. Professor was in the wrong here. I'm sorry it took me 33 minutes to get here, but Professor was in the wrong. And it's provable just by reading her own statement about it. Statement from the University of Oklahoma. I didn't read this one in the other video I made, so I'll read it here. The University of Oklahoma takes seriously concerns involving First Amendment rights, certainly including religious freedoms. Upon receiving notice from the student on the grading of an assignment, the university immediately began a full review of the situation and has acted swiftly to address the matter. By the way, the university is spot on right here. And this is liberals shooting themselves in the foot over this whole thing, because this is excellent defense of higher education. This is the way the process should work. They're taking the right steps. Okay, we got a professor. We thought she was pretty good. We vetted her, whatever. The grades, everything else said she was going to be a good fit for the job, the interview, everything else. However, we received notice that something was worth looking into, and we started looking into it right away. Now, whether this is just because TP USA got involved, or because it went public or whatever, that's possible. But this should be highlighted as defense of higher education in general, right? Of a system that a lot of people don't trust actually working properly and coming out with a statement that is appropriate to the situation that happened. Whether it took some pushing or not, I don't know. But this sounds like a statement written by someone or a body of people that is taking appropriate action here. And a bunch of liberals are going to shoot themselves in the foot trying to defend this professor when it's really not logically defensible, and throwing the whole school under the bus, which by extension is one step away from throwing the whole educational system under the bus. Let's not go down that slippery slope, because that's not good debate. That's not logical. But you also have to, as a human being, talking to other human beings, you have to understand the audience. You have to understand what people do. So even though it's not good logic to say that by extension, all higher education is at fault, we should know that there's a fairly large number of people who will take that step, and we shouldn't give them a bone that they don't even deserve to have, because there's nothing in how this school responded that is inappropriate in any way. So regardless of where they take that and run with it, we shouldn't even be giving them that, period. Let's take a look at photos here, and we get most of the statement here in a photo. First, the college acted immediately to address the academic issue raised by the student. College leaders contacted her on the day her letter was received and have maintained regular communication throughout the process. This is intelligent, right? They're making very specific claims that can be either substantiated or refuted directly by the student very easily. Was she contacted on the day her letter was received? They're preempting what one of the major complaints is likely to be, which is they didn't act until TPUSA or the media got involved. And they're addressing that right here, knowing that it could be something that gets brought up. Like, this is actually intelligent. And they're saying, yeah, we addressed her the day we got her letter. Let's leave no room for confusion about that. And we've maintained regular communication throughout the process. As previously stated, a formal grade appeals process was conducted. This is saying, hey, things go wrong sometimes. This is not a higher education thing. This is not a this college thing. Things get called into question sometimes, no matter who you are, where you are. But we have steps that we are taking to make sure it gets resolved the correct way, and that's really all you can expect of anybody. So the process resulted in steps to ensure no academic harm to the student from the graded assignments. Second, the student reported filing a claim of illegal discrimination based on religious beliefs to the appropriate university office. OU has a clear process for reviewing such claims, and it has been activated. The graduate student instructor has been placed on administrative leave pending the finalization of this process. To ensure fairness in the process, a full-time professor is serving as the course instructor for the remainder of the semester. We can debate whether it's appropriate to pull this. Did they use the word student teacher? The graduate student instructor. So student teacher, graduate student instructor, has been placed on administrative leave. Was it appropriate to place her on administrative leave for that long? Possibly. We don't know. We don't know all the details of this investigation. And like I said in my other video, you'd really have to compare the grade given to that student to the grade given to other students who wrote at a similar level to understand whether she was discriminated against or not. I would argue that it's very poor grading practices in general. Just the fact that she got a 0. She should not have gotten a 0 on that essay. If she gave her a C or a D or even a high E, I could be convinced that I disagree with the grade, but that there was no mishandling that happened and that it was consistent with school standards. But a 0 sounds super suspicious to me. It was not a 0. There's no world in which a 0 was defensible as the appropriate grade for that essay. So OU remains firmly committed to fairness, respect, and protective, who knows what, because this article doesn't care about you, doesn't care about a trans professor, doesn't care about the student. They care about clicking on ads. So that's why we will never know. Let's see what else we got. Okay. Okay. Oof. Oof. But since Kurth is trans, this is definitely the reason Fulnecky claims she's been persecuted because of her religious belief. By the way, I've never heard her use the word persecuted. Maybe Fulnecky used that word. I haven't heard her use that word. I've heard the word discriminated against. Those are two very different things, and it's just another example of spinning the reality, as far as I know, to make this worse than it is. And that's BS. It's BS whenever anyone does it for any reason, any political viewpoint, whatever. Fulnecky made her charge despite Kurth's kindly and fulsomely explained reason for the grade, which she explicitly noted was not based on Fulnecky's ideology, but simply her failure to follow the directions of her assignment. Wow. So this is like saying, hey, Pete Hegseth said that he followed all national and international laws when he blew people up in the Caribbean, so we're just going to believe him. The consequences are not nearly as dire, but it's the same illogical BS, indefensible way of thinking, right? Fulnecky made her charge despite Kurt's kindly and falsely explained BS. Anyways, let's get to the real BS. Reasoning for the grade, which she explicitly noted was not based on Fulnecky's ideology. Oh, she said it wasn't because of her ideology. Therefore, it definitely wasn't because of her ideology. This BS. Nobody trusts someone on the other side of the political aisle enough to say, oh, they said they didn't do that, so they definitely didn't do that. It's so meaningless. It's so meaningless when you turn around and do the exact same thing for people on your side of the political aisle or spectrum. Completely meaningless. It's a legitimate statement, but it's completely meaningless when you don't apply it equally to people you agree with. So, but to many right-wing Christians, of course, any pushback is a religion-based attack. Some, yes, absolutely. Absolutely, there are Christians who feel that any pushback at all is a religion-based attack. However, there is pretty clear evidence that she was, in this case, discriminated against. And let's not lump those all into the same category. That's like crying anti-Semitism anytime someone disagrees with your viewpoint about the actions of the government of Israel. It's the same BS stuff. Trying to make this so black and white, no room for anything else. No room for intelligent thought, for intelligent evidence-based criticism, and for getting to the bottom of something instead of just labeling and throwing people into a category and saying this is what they're doing because they're in that category. No, intelligent, rational thought, super important for everybody, especially the people whose lives are actually on the line when we don't do it. And that's why I can't stand it for when it's done anywhere. Okay, so she had her parents alert right. Okay, now she called mommy. She had her parents alert right-wing media and wrote a letter to Oklahoma's governor claiming she was being persecuted. Let's read that letter. I'll hold off judgment whether she used that word persecuted or not. But like, please don't bring new words into the article unless you're going to provide support for it. And naturally, she immediately received support from the opportunists and ideologues like this website, except on the other side, at the late Charlie Kirk's far-right organization Turning Point USA. In a statement on X, TPUSA called Kirk, quote, mentally ill and excoriated her for supposedly persecuting Fulnecky in a series of posts that included screenshots of both Fulnecky's essay and Kurth's response, which very clearly show no persecution occurred. False. Very clearly show that discriminatory action was taken. Persecution, again, that's a word that this article has suddenly thrown into the mix. The statement in part reads, quote, again, selective quotes, but okay, it's better than nothing. Clearly, this professor lacks the intellectual maturity to set her own bias aside and take grading seriously. Kind of sounds like that's likely true. Professors like this are the very reason conservatives can't voice their beliefs in the classroom. Well, if you get a 0 for voicing your belief, that would be kind of make it difficult to voice your beliefs in the classroom. You'd be put in a very difficult situation. Do I fail my classes, or do I uh, give up my beliefs and write what the teacher wants to see? Again, if there was criteria, if there was a rubric for this assignment that she did not follow, that's a different issue. But please, in that case, this is terrible reporting, because you should show us that. So this is, of course, flatly false. I'm reading here again. Fulnecky was permitted to voice her beliefs in the classroom and has faced no consequences whatsoever, besides a failing grade for writing a completely different essay than she was asked to write. We have no basis for knowing what she was asked to write. I've said it a million times, but that's because this article keeps bringing it up a million times without showing any evidence. But even that consequence for her actions is being erased. The University of Oklahoma, that consequence for her actions. It's like she beat someone to death, right? Her action was she wrote an essay that the teacher didn't like. That's her action as far as we know. The University of Oklahoma quickly issued a statement in full support of Fulnecky. No, they did not. That's ridiculous. They did not write a statement in full support of Fulnecky. They wrote a statement making clear that they are looking into something that they have good reason to look into. And it would be incredibly inappropriate for a university to hear a report of discrimination of potential, possible, alleged discrimination by any employee of that school and to not look into it. That would be terrible. Whether it's a Muslim student, a Christian student, an atheist student, doesn't matter. If they hear a report and it's credible enough to warrant looking into further, they should. And the statement that they put out is completely intelligent and in keeping with the situation at hand. So the University of Oklahoma quickly issued a statement in full support of Fulnecky. No, they did not, confirming that Kurth's grade for the essay will not stand. They stated that there would not be a unwarranted negative impact to her academics. Will the grade stand? Probably not, because she doesn't deserve a 0. And when the university reviews the information at hand, they're going to find that she did not deserve a 0 because she didn't. So the grade probably won't stand. But that's not what they said. They said they're going to make sure that she is not unfairly negatively impacted academically by discrimination. In so many words, that's really what they said. It read in part, the University of Oklahoma takes seriously concerns involving First Amendment rights, certainly including religious freedoms. That line alone is laughable. What? Because the First Amendment protects free speech against limitations imposed by government? Because the First Amendment protects free speech against limitation imposed by governments. A failing grade does not constitute a limitation on free speech in the first place. Using grading, using that as a mechanism to punish a student, which is possibly what happened, I think that would be suppression of free speech in a way. It'd be using power to it would be using power to suppress the student's voice. So maybe it's not a cut and clear thing. However, addressing the fact that the student has First Amendment rights and that they're going to be protected by the university is absolutely appropriate on the part of the university. So they're really bending over backwards now to somehow just throw the university under the bus in every single way except for, with the exception of this one professor and her terrible grading of this assignment. But even if it did, Kurth and the University of Oklahoma are not a government. This is quite literally not how conservatives' beloved Constitution works. Excuse me. Oh, seriously. For saying that it's the conservatives' beloved Constitution. Again, I don't know if this is actually a liberal, website, article site, whatever. Probably not. Like I said, just like New York Post on the right, Comic Sans on the left, apparently, probably a site that does not care about people, does not care about conservatives, does not care about liberals, cares only about getting clicks and likes and advertising revenue. And they're trying to rile people up to get those things. Because this was the most counterproductive, stupid thing that you could ever say in regards to how conservatives and liberals view the Constitution. I know a lot of people who are politically liberal, politically lean towards Democratic candidates who love the Constitution. I know people who served in the military who lean Democratic, who love the Constitution. Do not, and I know conservatives who love the Constitution as well. I know people who vote conservative, have conservative beliefs, who love the Constitution. Do not mock the Constitution, the beloved Constitution. Do not mock the Constitution, and do not mock the conservatives and call it their beloved Constitution, because it's a beloved document, seriously, to many conservatives and many liberals. And the fact that we don't have any trust for each other on that fact is a massive problem right now. And you're just making it worse. Okay, so the statement went on to say that the school had initiated a grades appeal process to make sure Fulnecky would suffer no academic harm, yes, before validating her claim of illegal discrimination on the basis of religious beliefs by placing Kurth on leave. We already quoted this. The uproar and especially the university's responses sparked outrage among many online. Unfairly so. And maybe we don't get the rest of this article because the website sucks. But let's stop there. That's probably enough. End the screen recording. Just can't believe I had enough storage on my phone for this hour-long diatribe, monologue, whatever. Look, this is a distraction. This whole thing. It's a distraction. It's also an important issue for this individual student. It's an important issue for this university. It's an important issue for all of us by extension, the fact that, how we allow or disallow freedom of expression and make sure that people are not discriminated against by government entities, especially for that expression. It's important, but it's being handled. Okay, this university is handling it. They put out a statement that is appropriate to what happened, appropriate to the reasonable suspicion that the student was discriminated against. It's all being handled. We don't need to go on and on about it online, which I just did for an hour, so I'm kind of disproving that. But my point is, there are important things happening, and the takeaways are important. The issue itself is being handled. I'm not trying to help the student by talking about this. I'm not trying to help the university resolve it because it sounds like they've got it. I'm trying to help us all understand that the importance of this issue is not that this student's going to be forever downtrodden at this university, because that's not happening. And actually, it's important to say that it's not happening. The importance of this issue is kind of to understand that all these loud voices on either side are not benefiting any of us, right? An issue happened. There's legitimate reason to think it was an issue. The university is handling it according to their policies and procedures, which are put in place for this kind of thing. Um, so we need to, the takeaway for us is why would anybody on either side of the political spectrum defend stuff just because it happens to align with what you believe in or the way you feel about the world? And I did my whole other video on this about the essay itself, the quality of the writing, the quality of the thought, and why it didn't deserve a 0 by any means. It didn't even deserve to fail. And that's coming from somebody who was in AP English, who was the first person in my high school, as far as I know, maybe the only person to this day to receive the top score possible on the AP English test. Who was a National Merit finalist, 99th percentile, highest possible, on the PSAT, who scored the highest possible score on the English and language arts portions of both the SAT and ACT. I know what I'm talking about. All right, I could write circles around definitely the author of this article, and probably that professor herself and the student. But that student's work was consistent with what you could and should expect from a college freshman, sophomore, junior, whatever she was, who holds the particular beliefs that she holds, and wrote a reaction paper that was informed by her beliefs. It wasn't crazy, it wasn't wacko, it wasn't all over the place, it wasn't self-contradictory throughout, though there may have been one contradiction within it. So to bend over backwards to make that something that it isn't, and include, I'm going to pull the right wing back in here and say, including you, including if you're trying to make this like all higher education sucks, every single professor is a trans professor who would fail any paper that they disagree with. No, not the case. Sometimes things like this happen, but by and large, these are professional institutions that have good policies in place, that are protecting students and do care about that. There's some bad. There's some bad that happens at universities in a lot of ways. There's bad things that happen in pretty much any category that you care to create in the world. There's bad that happens within left-wing circles, within right-wing circles, within the church, outside the church. People abuse positions of power. People abuse both the positions of power that they've been given and the ones that they assert for themselves all the time. There does not seem to be any religion or lack of religion that really completely eliminates that. People still do that. So if you're trying to throw any big group, whether it's the university, whether it's Christians, whether it's non-Christians, whether it's trans individuals, which are still a very small group in even the US, if you're trying to throw any of them under the bus as a result of this story, you're part of the problem. Right? We need to address individual issues and events logically if and when they occur, and not try to make a story that doesn't exist out of it to feed your personal political narrative at the expense of reality. And then we need to move on, and we need to apply what we learned to every situation, especially those where it's a matter of life and death. So thanks for watching this video. I appreciate it. I've gotten a fair number of views on some similar videos I've posted lately where it's just me giving my opinions, and hopefully backing them up, not necessarily with empirical evidence or references, because that's not what this is, but with logical thought that is defensible start to finish throughout. Like, tell me where I'm wrong if I'm wrong. I appreciate getting the views, and I'm trying really hard to focus in on what really matters because I don't want to be just another loud voice trying to get the clicks and the likes at to the detriment of our whole society and of people. So thanks again, and I will catch you later on a different episode.